Hey guys, tonight we're rolling into something a little louder, a little hotter, and a lot more claustrophobic. We're heading straight into one of the largest tank battles in history, the Battle of Kursk, 1943. But don't get excited just yet. You're not a heroic commander surveying the battlefield from a hilltop. You're not even a lucky infantryman hiding in a foxhole. You're inside a Panzer tank, and trust me, you're going to hate it. Forget the movies where tanks look like unstoppable metal beasts thundering through the countryside. In reality, being inside one feels more like volunteering for a mobile coffin that doubles as a slow cooking oven and triples as a target for every weapon in the area. Before we start, take a second to like the video if you actually enjoy this kind of history deep dive, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always wild to see who's tuning in, while we talk about the kind of historical misery no one should romanticize. Now, dim the lights, maybe put on a fan for that low hum in the background, and let's climb into your steel nightmare together. It's July 1943, the Eastern Front. You're part of the German army's grand plan to smash through Soviet defences in what's about to become the biggest armoured clash in human history. Sounds epic, right? Here's the problem. The moment you step up to your assigned Panzer, the fantasy starts crumbling. It's not gleaming in the sun like a parade model. It's filthy, dented, streaked with mud, oil, and soot from weeks of movement and fighting. The smell hits you before you even climb inside. A choking mix of diesel fuel, burned powder, unwashed uniforms, and the metallic tang of grease and hot metal. And that's before you add the human factor. 4 other crew members, all sweating, all unshaven, all existing in a space about the size of a family bathtub, with just enough room to load shells, drive, and argue. You don't step into a Panzer so much as fold yourself into it. The turret hatch is barely wide enough for your shoulders, and the moment you slide down inside, you realise you can't stand upright, can't stretch your legs, and can barely turn your head without knocking into someone else's elbow or the breech of the main gun. The walls are steel, yes, but they're also less than an inch from your face in some spots. No matter where you are in here, your knees are pressing against something, your back is hunched, and your neck is already aching. There's no comfortable position. Outside, the world might be wide and open, but in here, your only view is through narrow vision slits and small periscopes smeared with dust and insect guts. The light is dim, flickering between the shadows inside and the occasional harsh beam cutting in from outside when the hatch opens. You can't hear much of what's happening beyond the engine noise, the clank of gears, and the occasional metallic slam as someone moves a shell into place. And the air. There's no breeze, no circulation beyond the hot gusts of exhaust and the sharp chemical reek from fired shells. Breathing feels like work. This isn't even combat yet. This is just you getting acquainted with your new home. And that home doesn't care if you're tired, scared, or regretting all your life choices. The crew space is designed for function, not comfort. You're surrounded by sharp corners, bolts sticking out, and metal surfaces ready to bruise your shins, elbows and ribs every time the tank lurches over uneven ground. The floor is slippery with grime and whatever fluids have leaked from the engine or been spilled from the crew's canteens. There's no settling in period. The moment the engine roars to life, the temperature jumps. It's summer at Kursk, which means outside it's already scorching. Inside, The heat from the engine and the lack of ventilation turn the crew compartment into a sauna within minutes. Your uniform sticks to your back, sweat trickles down your face, and you haven't even fired a shot yet. The smell intensifies, the noise rises, and suddenly you're in motion, slowly, heavily, rumbling forward into what will be one of the longest and worst days of your life. And here's the thing, you still think you're the hunter. You still imagine the Panzer as an invincible weapon. But the longer you sit in here, the more you start to realise you're also the prey. It's early July 1943, and the sun over the Russian steppe is already trying to burn through the horizon like it has a personal grudge against you. The fields are endless, flat, and shimmering with heat, but you barely notice any of it because right now your world is about to shrink to the size of a cramped steel box. Your orders are simple. Get inside your assigned Panzer, join the column, and prepare for the biggest tank battle in history. You're not a general with a map and a tent. You're not even an officer with binoculars and a fresh uniform. You're a crewman in a 45-ton machine designed for war and built with all the warmth and charm of an industrial meat grinder. From the outside, the Panzer still carries some of that intimidating look you've seen in propaganda posters. Long barrel, low profile, thick armour. The kind of thing that's supposed to make enemy soldiers soil themselves. But up close, it's less heroic and more tired. The paint is chipped from transport and shrapnel. Dried mud clings to the tracks in heavy clumps. Oil streaks mark the engine vents. There's a faint scorch mark near the rear plate from some close call the previous crew probably didn't want to talk about. The smell that drifts out from the open hatch is the first real hint of what's waiting for you inside. It's not the sharp, fresh scent of new machinery. It's a choking cocktail of diesel fumes, old gunpowder residue, metal dust, grease, and the lingering tang of human sweat that's been stewing for days in summer heat. You climb up onto the hull, boots slipping slightly on the dusty metal, and lower yourself toward the open turret hatch. The edge of the armour is hot to the touch, even though it's still early in the day. Your hands brush it for less than a second before instinctively recoiling, but there's nowhere else to grab, so you grip it anyway, letting the heat burn a warning into your palms. Dropping inside isn't graceful. There's no ladder, no ramp, just a narrow opening that you twist yourself through like a human corkscrew. One moment, the open air is around you, the sounds of distant engines and shouted orders echoing across the steppe. The next, it's gone, replaced by the dim, claustrophobic interior of your new home. The light fades instantly. You blink, trying to adjust, and the first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you feel. The air is heavy, not just warm, heavy, thick with the smell of hot metal, oil, and that damp, sour scent of clothing that hasn't been washed in weeks. Every breath feels like pulling in someone else's body heat. The walls close in immediately. Your shoulders brush against metal surfaces, no matter which way you turn. The ceiling is low enough that you can't straighten your back, and every available surface seems to be covered in protruding bolts, levers, or the ends of ammunition racks waiting to jab you if you shift in the wrong direction. There's no floor space to speak of. The driver's position is a narrow seat wedged between the gearbox and the front armour. The gunner sits to one side, cramped against the main gun breech. The loader, who you're replacing today, has the dubious honour of occupying a spot that requires constant twisting, ducking, and ratcheting for 75mm shells stacked wherever they fit. The commander stands, or rather stoops, beneath the cupola, peering out through his vision blocks, his legs planted between yours and the gunner's. It's not just cramped, it's intimate in the worst possible way. You're going to get familiar with everyone's knees, elbows and sweat patterns in the next few hours, whether you like it or not. You sit down, or rather, you wedge yourself into the space that counts as your seat, and your knees immediately press against the cold casing of the gun. Your back finds no support, only another flat metal surface. Someone passes you a headset connected to the tank's intercom, but it's battered, one earphone barely hanging on by its wiring, and the padding smells like old leather soaked in sweat. The moment the engine starts, conversation becomes pointless. The Maybach engine behind you roars to life with the subtlety of a factory explosion, vibrating through the entire hull. It's a low, constant growl that turns into a deafening roar as the driver revs up to move. The noise is everywhere, filling your head, pressing into your skull. You feel it through the soles of your boots, up your spine, into your teeth. Any words spoken over the intercom are just muffled bursts of static and shouting. As the tank lurches forward, you grab for something, anything, to steady yourself. Your hand closes around a shell casing still warm from being fired the day before. It's wedged in the rack next to you, slick with oil. Every bump in the ground translates directly into your bones. There's no suspension that makes this ride smooth. The tracks slam over uneven ground, and every impact rattles your ribs, knocks your helmet into the turret wall, and remind you that this is not a vehicle designed for comfort. You try to look outside, but the loader's position doesn't have a good view. You have to crane your neck toward a periscope smeared with dust and streaks of dried mud. The world outside is reduced to a narrow slice of a movement. Grass, sky, maybe the silhouette of another Panzer in front of you. It's like watching a movie through a dirty keyhole. You can't see the whole picture. You can barely see enough to know if you're about to be shot at. Inside, the temperature climbs fast. The steel hull absorbs heat from the sun like an oven, and the engine dumps even more warmth into the crew compartment. The air gets hotter, stickier. Sweat trickles down your back. Your helmet strap soaks through, and your uniform clings to your skin. There's no ventilation, no fan, no breeze. Just the occasional burst of fresh air when the commander cracks open the hatch, which is immediately swallowed by the smells inside. Fuel, sweat, cordite, and something faintly sour that you try not to identify. You shift your weight and immediately regret it. Your boot slips in something greasy on the floor, and the toe of your other boot bangs into a wrench lying loose underfoot. You glance down, but the dim light makes it hard to tell what's what. Every surface seems coated in a film of oil and grime. You think about how long it would take to clean a space, then remember that no one cleans it. There's no time, no priority for that. This is a fighting machine, not a showroom. The crew just lives with it, or in it, until it breaks down or burns. As the tank picks up speed, the ride gets rougher. Every jolt slams your knees into the ammo rack or your elbow into the side of the gun breech. The commander's boots brush against your leg every time he shifts his stance. The gunner's shoulder is pressed into yours, and you can feel the heat radiating off him as much as the engine. There's no such thing as personal space in here, as you're all packed so tightly that when one person moves, everyone else has to adjust. You start to notice the small details that make this experience worse. The constant metallic clinking from loose tools rattling in their brackets. The faint hiss of hydraulics when the turret moves. The way the air inside gets even thicker after the first round is fired. The sharp, acrid smoke curling through the compartment and making your eyes sting. There's no pause for the fumes to clear. The hatches stay shut unless absolutely necessary, because an open hatch is an invitation for shrapnel or a sniper's bullet. This is what passes for safety. A few centimetres of armour between you and everything outside that wants you dead. It's enough to stop most small arms fire, but against anti-tank guns, shape charges, or a lucky hit from a T-34, it's just a delay. The armour doesn't feel invincible from the inside. It feels like a tin can you happen to be inside of, one that will crumple or burst if hit hard enough. And the thing is, you haven't even seen the enemy yet. You haven't felt the tank shudder from a near miss, or watched sparks fly inside when a shell hits and glances off. Right now, you're just moving to the starting line, and it's already uncomfortable enough to make you think about every single wrong turn in your life that brought you here. The commander shouts something into the intercom. You can't make it out clearly, but the gunner reacts, swinging the turret slightly. You feel the massive gun shift above your head, the weight of it moving the whole tank slightly sideways. You adjust your grip on the shell next to you, knowing that when the time comes, you'll be hauling these out of the rack, sliding them into the breech, and locking them in place as fast as your cramped arms will allow. Every bump, every jolt, every shiver of the tracks underneath feels like it's working its way into your bones. You know this ride is just beginning. It takes less than an hour for the inside of the tank to make its personality known. And unfortunately, it's the kind of personality that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. This isn't just a vehicle. This is your new home, your mobile address on the Eastern Front, and it's every bit as hostile to you as it is to the enemy. The Panzer does not care whether you're comfortable, or if you can move your legs without cramping, or if you can breathe air that doesn't smell like a mixture of burnt oil and damp laundry. It's a metal box with one job: to move, shoot, and not die immediately. And it performs that job with all the warmth of a prison cell bolted to an engine. But you learn quickly that steel is a bad roommate. It doesn't absorb sound, it amplifies it. Every gear shift is a metallic bang. Every turn of the turret is a grinding moan. Every track link slapping the ground is a deep, repetitive thud that you feel in your jaw. The noise doesn't just come from one direction. It's all around you, bouncing off the armour and into your skull until it feels like your brain is vibrating. After a while, you stop hearing individual sounds and start hearing one constant, punishing roar, like being stuck inside an enormous drum someone is hitting from the outside. Then there's the temperature. Outside, the Russian summer is hot. Inside, it's unbearable. The sun turns the tank's armour into a giant frying pan, and there's nowhere inside that isn't in direct contact with that heat. The floor radiates warmth through your boots. The walls warm your shoulders until your uniform sticks to you. The engine pumps out a steady blast of hot air into the compartment, and with no ventilation system worth mentioning, the heat just builds and builds. After 20 minutes, you're sweating hard enough to feel rivulets run down your ribs. After an hour, you're soaked. It doesn't matter that you're not running, not hauling gear, not even under fire yet. You're sweating as though you've been sprinting uphill in full kit. and just when you think you've adjusted, something changes. The sun goes down, or clouds roll in, or the engine's been off for long enough to stop producing heat, and suddenly you're in a freezer. The same steel that cooked you in the afternoon now leaches every scrap of warmth from your body. Your damp clothes cling to your skin and wick away whatever heat you've managed to hold on to. Your hands stiffen. Your nose runs. Your breath condenses in the air in front of you. The only source of warmth is the body heat of the other men crammed in beside you. And that's not the kind of comfort anyone is eager to rely on. Of course, you're never the right temperature for long. 1 minute you're wishing for ice water, the next you trade your share of rations for a wool blanket. Kursk in July doesn't care about your internal thermostat, and neither does the Panzer. It's just a big, indifferent heat sink that responds to the environment with complete disregard for its occupants. The air is another problem entirely. In theory, there are ways for fresh air to get in. Hatches, periscopes, a few small vents. In practice, you don't open them unless you have to, because every opening is also an invitation for shrapnel, bullets, or a Soviet soldier with a Molotov cocktail. So you breathe what's already inside. That means every exhalation from you and the rest of the crew lingers, mixing with engine fumes, the powder smoke from the main gun, and the sharp, bitter stink of the spent shell casings piled up near your boots. If the breeze outside is carrying the smell of diesel and cordite from other tanks in the column, it seeps in and joins the mix. After a few hours, it's not just unpleasant, it's oppressive. Your eyes water, your throat feels raw, and you can't shake the suspicion that you're losing brain cells with every breath. You try shifting your position to get more comfortable, but there's nowhere to go. Your knees are pressed against the ammo racks, your back against a metal panel, your boots wedged into the narrow space between the floor and another man's legs. Every piece of equipment in here seems designed to jab, scrape, or pinch you if you move the wrong way. The shells themselves are smooth enough, but they're heavy and awkward to maneuver in this tight space. And more than once, you bang your knuckles against something hard and unyielding. There's no cushioning on your seat, no padding on the walls, nothing soft anywhere except the occasional rag stuffed into a crevice to stop a persistent rattle. Even those rags are stiff with grease and dirt. When the tank lurches over rough ground, you're thrown against the metal hard enough to bruise. If the driver hits a ditch at speed, you bang your head against the inside of the turret and see stars. There's no graceful way to absorb these hits. You just tense up and take them, over and over, until you're sore in places you didn't know could get sore. Meals inside this oven freezer are their own punishment. The rations are whatever you brought, or whatever the supply line handed out that morning. Tins of meat, rock-hard bread, maybe some dried fruit if you're lucky. Heating anything means setting it near the engine until it's warm, which is fine if you want to smell diesel while you eat. If you're moving, you eat on the go, wedging the tin between your knees and scooping with a spoon while the tank bounces and sways. There's no table, no clean surface, and nowhere to wash your hands. You just hope you're not eating more grease and grime than actual food. And there's no real way to clean yourself either. In the heat, the sweat just dries into a salty crust on your skin and uniform. In the cold, you avoid taking off your gloves or loosening your clothing because the chill hit instantly. Washing your face or hands means wasting precious drinking water, and you can't spare much of that. After a while you stop noticing the film of dirt and oil on your skin. It becomes part of you. The way the constant noise becomes part of you. The way the smell becomes part of you. You learn quickly to keep your gear close and secured. A loose canteen can roll underfoot. A wrench can slide into an awkward corner. And you do not want to be the man scrambling for something while the tank is moving or firing. Every time the turret turns, every time the hull shifts, everything inside moves with it, including you. If you're not braced, you'll end up stumbling into the breach, another crewman, or the hot casing of the last shell you fired. Even when the tank is stationary, it's not quiet. The metal ticks and pings as it cools. The engine grumbles when idling, and the faint squeak of the turret mechanism turning seems to find its way into your bones. If you're unlucky enough to be parked near other running tanks, their noise seeps into yours, blending into a constant industrial drone that makes conversation almost impossible without shouting. Time inside here stretches. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like days. You lose track of whether it's morning or afternoon because the light doesn't change much through the narrow vision slits. There's no breeze to mark the pask of the day, no shift in shadows on the ground. Just the same dim, enclosed space, the same heat or cold pressing in, the same smells, the same cramped positions. You start to understand why veterans describe the tank as both protection and prison. Yes, the armour can save you from a rifle bullet, and yes, the gun can tear apart anything lighter than another tank. But you also know that if something big enough hits you, the armour becomes a trap. The same walls that keep the enemy out will keep you in if you need to get out fast. And that thought sits in the back of your mind like a slow leak of dread. By now, the romantic image of the mighty Panzer has peeled away. You're not riding a war machine in triumph across the steppe. You're riding inside a rolling oven in the day and a freezer at night, one that's deafeningly loud, smells like a mix of fuel and human exhaustion, and offers you about as much living space as the inside of a wardrobe. And you know this is just the beginning. The metal home you're in isn't just uncomfortable. It's going to become dangerous the moment the first enemy shell arcs your way. And outside, the battle is getting closer. You can feel it in the way the engine note changes, in the commander's shorter, sharper orders, and in the subtle shift of everyone's posture. Whatever hell this steel box has been so far, you're about to see what it's like when it earns its reputation. If you thought the Panzer was tight when you first climbed inside, wait until you've been in it for a couple of hours with 4 other men, all moving, all sweating, all trying to do their jobs in a space smaller than the inside of a family car. This isn't just close quarters. This is human sardine territory. Every centimetre of space has already been claimed by something more important than your comfort. A pipe, a rack of shells, the corner of the gearbox, the handle of a tool you hope you never have to use while moving. The crew compartment isn't built for living in. It's barely built for existing in. You've got the driver in front, hunched over the controls like he's trying to hug them. The gunner sits just to your side, his knees practically touching yours, his hands permanently poised over the elevation and traverse wheels. The commander stands, well, half stands, half crouches, in the cupola above you, his legs braced between you and the gunner. He's got just enough room to turn in place if he tucks his elbows in. And then there's you, the loader, wedged between the ammo racks and the breech, a position that requires constant twisting and reaching in angles that your spine was never meant to handle. When you're all seated or braced, it's manageable in the same way that being in a packed elevator is manageable, as long as no one moves. But the moment anyone needs to do anything, everyone else has to adjust. If the commander shifts to look out a different vision block, his boots knock into your thigh. If the gunner leans forward to adjust the sight, his shoulder digs into your ribs. When you need to grab another shell from the rack, you have to step on the driver's foot or push past the gunner, hoping you don't smack the breech lever with your elbow in the process. The shells themselves are heavy and awkward, over 2 feet long, with enough weight to make you feel every lift and every twist. The racks are set into the walls and floor, so you're constantly bending, reaching, and turning in this tiny space, all while the tank jolts and bounces over uneven ground. You don't just pass shells to the gunner. You have to do it without knocking anything loose, tripping on a boot, or losing your balance when the driver slams the tank into a sudden turn. There's no such thing as personal space. You're breathing the same air, often at the same time, and you can't avoid the smell of the others. After a while, the sweat and engine fumes merge into one constant haze that hangs in the compartment. You can tell who's been on the crew longer just by the ingrained grime on their uniforms. Nobody smells good in here. You all smell like you've been locked in a boiler room with a grease trap. You don't get to stretch. You don't get to stand up properly. If you want to move at all, you have to calculate every step like it's a puzzle. Hand here, foot there, duck under this lever, shift your hips around the breech, avoid the commander's headset cord, don't kick the gunner's traverse wheel. And you have to do it fast, because in combat, hesitation gets people killed. It's not just the physical crowding, it's the constant contact. A knee against your leg, an elbow in your side, a boot tapping yours as the driver adjusts his footing. Even when the tank is stopped, you're all leaning against each other without meaning to. After a few hours, it stops feeling like accidental contact and starts feeling like the natural state of things. You're not 5 separate people anymore. You're a single uncomfortable knot of bodies wrapped in steel. The mental strain creeps in without you noticing. You can't see the sky. You can't see more than a slit of the outside world unless you're in the commander's spot. The walls are always there, less than an arm's length away in every direction. Even the light is limited, a dull, dusty glow from the periscope, the occasional flash when the hatch opens. Everything else is shadow and steel. If you've ever felt trapped in a small room, multiply that by the smell of fuel, the noise of an engine at full throttle, and the knowledge that the walls around you are also the thing every enemy gun is aiming for. You think you'll get used to it. You don't. You just get tired enough to stop fighting it. Your legs cramp, your back aches, and your neck locks into a permanent forward hunch. You forget what it feels like to swing your arms when you walk. Even sitting down somewhere with elbow room starts to feel like a fantasy. And the only time you'll have more space inside this tank is when one of you isn't moving anymore. And that's not the kind of relief anyone wants. The worst part is that the cramped quarters aren't just uncomfortable, they make everything harder. Reloading takes longer when you have to work around someone else's arm. Communicating takes longer when you have to twist and shout into their ear over the engine. Getting to an important piece of equipment might mean leaning over another man entirely. Every second wasted on those movements is another second the enemy can take advantage of. But there's no fixing it. This is the design. This is what works on paper. And what works on paper doesn't care if your knees are grinding against cold steel for 12 hours at a stretch. You tell yourself it's fine, that you'll get through it. Then the turret swings to face the direction of the next target, and you feel the familiar squeeze of bodies shifting, boots pressing against yours, the entire crew moving as one. And you know that for as long as you're inside this Panzer, this is how it will be. 5 men in a box, breathing each other's air, moving in each other's space, and hoping you all live long enough to be uncomfortable again tomorrow. And outside, the battle is still building, the sounds of distant artillery starting to echo through the steel walls. The space inside feels smaller with every boom. You notice it in the first 10 minutes, but you tell yourself it's just the smell of machinery. After an hour, you realise it's more than that. The air inside the Panzer isn't something you breathe so much as something you ingest. Every lungful feels heavy, as if you're swallowing it, and it lingers in your throat like an unwelcome guest. The source is everything around you. The engine is right there behind a thin bulkhead, running hot and pumping out fumes that squeeze in through every seam. The smell of diesel is constant, thick and oily, clinging to the back of your mouth. Then there's the cordite from the main gun and the machine gun. Every time a round goes off, the sharp, bitter smoke rolls back into the crew compartment. It burns your nose, stings your eyes, and makes your tongue feel dry and metallic. If the wind outside is wrong, the exhaust from other tanks in the column seeps in too, mixing into a fog that no human lung was designed for. And that's just the mechanical side of it. There's also the human part. 5 men breathing the same trapped air in a sealed box means that every exhale sticks around. It doesn't take long for the compartment to get thick with the sour tang of sweat and unwashed uniforms. There's no clean breeze, no cross-ventilation. Just stale, humid air that gets warmer and more oppressive with each passing hour. You can taste the salt from your own skin, and you can tell when someone nearby has been eating canned meat or chain smoking because it hangs in the air like another layer of exhaust. Every breath feels slightly wrong. It's warm, it's damp, and it carries too many flavours you didn't ask for. Your throat dries out, but somehow still feels coated in residue. You start coughing now and then, short, dry barks that don't really clear anything. The commander coughs too, then the driver. Nobody comments, because everyone knows it's just the air. It's the same for all of you. You can try opening a hatch for a moment, but the commander won't do it unless it's absolutely safe, and safe is not a word that gets used much at Kursk. Even if he does, the fresh air that rushes in is short-lived. As soon as the hatch closes, the Panzer goes back to marinating you in its own special atmosphere. Then there's the dust. Out on the steppe, every vehicle throws up clouds of it. The fine brown powder works its way through the narrowest gaps and settles on everything inside. You feel it in your nose and on your teeth, grit grinding faintly every time you clench your jaw. It gets into the corners of your eyes until they're red and itchy. When the sunlight manages to slip in through a slit or hatch, you can see the motes floating in the air, a visible reminder that you're breathing in the battlefield long before the shooting starts. The longer you're inside, the more you notice the way your head feels heavier, the way you blink more slowly. It's not just the heat, it's the low oxygen, the exhaust creeping in, the carbon monoxide that no one talks about, but everyone suspects is part of the reason tank crews look half drunk after a long day inside. There's no detector to warn you, No ventilation system that's going to fix it. You're just slowly getting dumber, slower, and more tired as you sit in your metal box. When the gun fires again, the concussion rattles through the compartment, and the smoke blooms instantly, curling in lazy, suffocating swirls. You try not to breathe deeply, but there's no way to avoid it entirely. The loader's job doesn't pause for air quality, so you're hauling another shell into place with your eyes watering and your chest tightening, knowing you'll be breathing in the leftovers for the next few minutes. You don't talk about it, you just live with it, the same way you live with the heat, the cold, the noise, and the cramped space. You learn to take shallow breaths when the smoke is worst, to turn your head slightly toward the tiny gap in the vision slit for even the faintest hint of air movement. Sometimes it helps, mostly it doesn't. Eventually, you stop thinking about fresh air entirely. You stop imagining the smell of rain or the sharp chill of a winter breeze. Your body adjusts, not by getting used to it, but by lowering your standards. The air is bad, it will always be bad, and you will keep breathing it because there's no other choice. The tank isn't just your transport and your armour, it's your atmosphere now, and it's not here to keep you comfortable. It's here to keep you moving until something stops it for good. And up ahead, the sound of gunfire is getting closer, which means the air inside is about to get worse. A lot worse. Your uniform is supposed to be practical. That's the idea anyway. Black wool to hide grease stains, a short jacket so you can move inside the turret, a side cap or beret to avoid banging into the inside of the hatch. On paper, it's functional. In reality, it's just another layer of punishment between you and the metal walls. The wool holds heat like a furnace. The moment you climb into the Panzer, it starts soaking up your sweat. And once it's wet, it stays wet. In the heat of a Russian summer, that means the fabric turns into a damp, clingy second skin that sticks to your arms, your back, and the back of your knees. When the sun goes down, or a cloud passes over, that same dampness starts sucking the heat out of you, chilling you in seconds. The fabric doesn't breathe. It traps whatever the air around you is doing, and in a tank, that's usually the worst version of whatever the weather offers. You've got a shirt under the jacket, but that's just more fabric to get damp. There's no taking it off. The steel surfaces inside a tank are rough, sharp, and occasionally hot. So bare skin is just asking for trouble. You learn to live with the itch of wool mixed with the scratch of seams, rubbing the same spot on your shoulder or waist, hour after hour. The collar digs into your neck when you lean forward. The cuffs catch on anything with an edge. If you need to reach for something quickly, you can feel the stitches pull tight across your back. Your trousers match the jacket, thick, stiff, and never truly clean. The knees are worn shiny from constant contact with the metal floor and the ammo racks, but the fabric itself never really softens. It just picks up more grime, more oil, more dust. When you kneel, you can feel the grit grinding into the fabric and through to your skin. Stand up again, and the creases in the wool stay, stiff with dried sweat and dirt. Then there's the smell. Wool is great at holding on to it, and in a tank, there's no shortage of things to smell. Engine fumes, cordite, sweat, and the general human haze of 5 men crammed together. All of it gets into the fibres of your uniform and never leaves. Even if you had the chance to wash it, which you don't, it would take more than soap and water to get it out. The stink becomes part of you. When you take the uniform off, it's still there. Faint, but impossible to ignore. Your boots are heavy leather, designed for durability, not comfort. They're stiff, they rub your ankles, and they trap heat until your socks are soaked through. Once your feet sweat, there's nowhere for the moisture to go. It just sits there, softening your skin until every step rubs it raw. Changing socks is a luxury, because that means you'd have to take off your boots, and there's rarely a good time to do that in the middle of a battle. By the time you get the chance, the inside of your boots smell like something died in there and decided to rot slowly. And the worst part? You only have the one set. There's no rotation, no spare jacket hanging in a locker somewhere. This is it. You wear it until it falls apart, or you do. Washing it means finding water, finding soap, finding time, and having somewhere to hang it while it dries. In other words, it doesn't happen. You just keep wearing it day after day, the layers of sweat, dirt and smoke building up like the rings in a tree trunk, each one marking another day you've survived in this steel coffin. You might try wiping your hands on your trousers after working with a shell or a greasy tool, but that just adds another stain to the collection. You might try loosening the jacket to cool down, but then you snag it on some protruding piece of metal and have to button it again. Eventually, you stop thinking about the uniform as clothing at all. It's just another piece of gear, part of the tank, part of the job, part of the discomfort that you carry with you from the moment you wake up to the moment you finally get to crawl out into open air again. And even then, when you're standing outside, the sun on your face, the breeze on your skin, you can feel it. The sweat still trapped in the fabric, the heat still radiating from the wool, the faint cling of dust and oil that no amount of brushing will remove. It's the kind of thing that reminds you that you're not just wearing this uniform. You're living in it, and it's going to keep living on you until someone higher up decides you've earned a replacement, or until the tank stops and you don't get back in. Outside, somewhere beyond the armour, the rattle of machine gun fire rolls in on the wind. The commander shifts in the cupola, eyes scanning, and you realise that your uniform is the least of your problems. You're about to find out what happens when the Panzer starts earning the holes in its paint. You don't eat breakfast in a Panzer the way you imagine soldiers eat breakfast in war movies. There's no tin mess kit, no orderly queue for hot food, no coffee poured into mugs by some cheerful quartermaster with a ladle. Breakfast in a tank is whatever you can put in your mouth without dropping it into the bilge or smearing it in grease. And it's rarely at a table, because your table is the nearest piece of flat metal that isn't too hot to touch. The day starts with noise. Not the sound of birds, not the peaceful clatter of a camp kitchen, but the raw, mechanical cough of the Maybach engine turning over and flooding the compartment with the first wave of exhaust fumes. If you're lucky, you've been awake for a while and already dug into your rations. If not, you're eating in motion, wedged between ammo racks and control levers, trying not to bite your tongue as the tracks slam over uneven ground. German rations in 1943 were meant to be balanced for nutrition. On paper, they were. In practice, out here in the middle of the Russian steppe, breakfast means whatever came in the last supply drop, and hasn't been crushed under the weight of a spare track link. The basic loadout? Bread, if it survived the night without turning into a damp sponge from condensation. A tin of meat, usually pork or beef in some kind of gelatinous fat that you're not sure is entirely animal in origin. Maybe some ersatz coffee powder, which doesn't taste like coffee so much as it tastes like something that wishes it had met coffee once in a past life. The bread is dense, dark, and heavy. Rye, mostly, because wheat is scarce and expensive. It comes in loaves that could double as self-defense weapons. Slicing it is an ordeal. You're doing it in cramped space, with a dull knife that's also been used on wire, rope, and possibly engine gaskets. Every cut sends crumbs tumbling to the floor, where they disappear into the layer of dust and oil, never to be seen again. If you're smart, you use the knife to wedge chunks out instead, eating them like you would an apple, except this apple tastes like dry earth and vinegar. The meat is worse. In the cold, the fat congeals into a waxy lid you have to chip through with a spoon. In the heat, it liquefies and coats everything in the tin with a slick sheen that clings to your fingers for the rest of the day. You learn to scoop fast before the tank hits a rut and sends a spoonful of salty, greasy mush onto your lap, or, worse, the commander's boot. Nobody wants to be the guy who feeds the commander's foot instead of his mouth. If you've got coffee, you don't brew it. There's no time, and there's no room for a pot in here. You mix the powder with lukewarm water from your canteen, shake it, and drink it like medicine. If the engine's been running long enough, you might hold the cup near the bulkhead to warm it, but that also means it'll taste faintly of exhaust. Not that it matters. The taste is secondary to the fact that it's liquid and vaguely caffeinated. You can tell who's been on the crew longer by the way they eat. New guys still try to keep their food clean, fussing with their rations to keep oil and grime off. The veterans? They've given up. They'll tear off a hunk of bread, swipe it across the meat tin, and pop it in their mouth without a second thought. Because out here, grease is just another condiment. Eating inside a moving tank is an exercise in timing and balance. You hold your tin or bread in one hand, brace yourself with the other, and try to anticipate every bump. The driver doesn't slow down for your meal. He's got orders, and those orders don't include keep it steady while the loader eats. A sudden turn will send you bumping shoulders with the gunner, spilling crumbs into the gap between the traverse wheel and the turret ring. A sharp stop will slide the meat tin right out of your hand and into the footwell, where it will pick up a nice coating of dust before you can grab it back. And there's no such thing as eating without sharing the experience with everyone else. The smell of your breakfast fills the compartment instantly. If you've got something even vaguely different from the others, maybe a scrap of sausage or a rare bit of cheese, everyone knows and everyone's looking. You'll offer a bite out of politeness, but you already know there won't be much left after that. Sometimes you get a bit of jam or honey. It's rare, and it feels like a miracle when it happens, but it's also a curse. Anything sweet in here draws flies, and flies in a Panzer are the worst kind of company. They buzz in your face, land on your food, and make circuits around the compartment like they're mapping it for a bombing run. Swatting them is impossible in the cramped space without hitting another crewman or knocking something important. So you just eat faster and hope they lose interest. Water is rationed too, and you drink it sparingly, because every sip now is one less you'll have later when the heat really starts grinding you down. The canteen is metal, and in the sun, it gets hot enough to make the water inside taste like it's been steeped in a rusted pipe. In the cold, it's so frigid it makes your teeth ache. Either way, you drink it because you have to, not because you want to. Every so often, you get the luxury of eating outside, maybe during a short halt before the next push. it's not much better. You're still crouched on hot armour, still surrounded by noise and dust, still watching the horizon for movement. The only difference is that the air is moving, and you can see the sky while you chew. That moment is enough to make the food taste almost good, but it never lasts. The order to mount up comes fast, and then it's back into the belly of the beast, back into the heat, back into the smell. The truth is, breakfast isn't about energy. It's about routine. You eat because it's the only way to keep going. The food doesn't make you feel better. It just makes you less hungry for a couple of hours. You've still got the heat, the fumes, the noise and the cramped space pressing in on you. You've still got the knowledge that before this day is over, you'll be loading shells with the taste of cold tinned meat still sitting in your throat. And in Kursk, 1943, there's a good chance this won't even be your last meal inside this tank. It might be your last meal, period. That thought doesn't stop you from eating, but it does make you chew a little slower sometimes, like you're trying to make the bread last, or savour the gritty texture of ersatz coffee for just a second longer. When you're done, there's no trash bin. The empty tins get stuffed into a corner, rattling around with every movement of the tank, or tossed out the hatch if the commander says it's safe. The crumbs stay on the floor, joining the other debris in the perpetual layer of filth. You wipe your hands on your trousers, adding another smudge to the collection, and get back to your station. Breakfast is over, not because you're full, but because the tank, and the war outside, doesn't care whether you've finished eating. The gunner shifts, the commander gives a short, sharp order, and you can feel the change in the crew. You're not thinking about food anymore. You're thinking about what's waiting just ahead, beyond the armour, beyond the smoke, where the Panzers will soon be trading shots with T-34s in the biggest tank battle in history. July in Kursk doesn't creep up on you. It slams into you the moment the sun clears the horizon. Out on the steppe, there's nothing to break the sunlight. No tall buildings, no thick forests, or no high hills to throw shade. Just open ground that stretches in every direction, soaking up the heat and throwing it back at you. For a tank crew, this isn't just uncomfortable. It's a slow, deliberate form of torture delivered by the weather itself. And your Panzer is the perfect chamber for it. From the outside, the tank already looks like it's baking. The dark paint absorbs every scrap of sunlight, turning the armour plates into huge, flat radiators. You can feel it even before you climb aboard. The steel is warm to the touch by mid-morning, hot enough by noon to burn your palm if you linger. Inside, it's worse. The thin layer of air between you and the armour is already sweltering, and once the engine fires up, you've effectively sealed yourself inside a rolling oven. The heat doesn't just build gradually, it spikes. The Maybach engine runs hot under load, and the compartment behind you channels that heat forward into the crew space. There's no ventilation system worth the name, just small openings that the commander is reluctant to crack because every open hatch is an open invitation for shrapnel, bullets, or worse. So the air inside stagnates, getting warmer, thicker, and harder to breathe with every passing minute. You sweat constantly. Not in the casual, it's a hot day way, but in the unrelenting, I am being steamed alive way. It starts under your arms and at the back of your neck, then runs down your spine and soaks the waistband of your trousers. Your shirt clings to your chest, your back, and the inside of your elbows. The sweat doesn't evaporate, it just pools and soaks into your uniform until you're carrying a thin film of your own personal brine. That's just you. Multiply it by 4 more men, each producing their own heat and sweat, each breathing out warm, humid air into a space that's already saturated. The combined body heat of the crew turns the interior into something close to a sauna, except instead of cedar planks and a bucket of water, you've got steel walls, the smell of diesel, and a floor sticky with oil. The heat changes how you move. You're slower, heavier, like you're wading through it. Every movement is an effort. Reaching for a shell, leaning forward to check a sight, turning your head to hear the commander shout through the headset. You wipe your face, but the sweat just comes back. You pull at your collar, but the air underneath is just as hot. There's no cool spot, no relief, not even for a moment. And it's not just your body that suffers, the equipment does too. The metal parts inside the turret warm up until they're uncomfortable to touch. The gun breech gets hot after repeated firing, and you have to be careful where you rest your hands. The shells themselves feel warm when you pull them from the racks. Even the headset gets hot, the leather pads turning slick and sticky against your skin. The worst is when you're stationary, engine running, waiting for the order to move or fire. Without the slight airflow from movement, the heat inside skyrockets. The air feels heavier, your breathing gets shallow, and you can feel your pulse in your temples. You don't want to move because every motion feels like it takes more effort than it should, but you can't sit still either. The sweat and heat keep you fidgeting, shifting your weight, trying to find a cooler spot that doesn't exist. You think about water constantly, but you can't drink much. The supply is limited, and the canteens are metal, which means the water inside is often warm enough to be unpleasant. You drink it anyway because the alternative is worse, but it doesn't refresh you. It just replaces what you've already sweated out, and within minutes you're thirsty again. Out on the steppe, the sun glares off everything. The armour, the dust, even the horizon itself. The light slices through the vision slits and periscopes, making you squint. It catches on the dust motes inside the tank, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Every breath tastes like hot metal and grit. Every time you lick your lips, you feel the fine layer of dust that settled on them, dry and abrasive. If you do open a hatch, the fresh air outside isn't much better. It's hot, dry, and carries the smell of fuel, exhaust, and scorched earth. The only real difference is that it moves, and even that's a mixed blessing. When the wind picks up, it blows dust into the turret, coating everything in a fine film that makes the sweat on your skin feel like mud. Prolonged heat inside a tank isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. The combination of high temperature, heavy gear, and constant exertion wears you down faster than you realise. You feel it in your arms when you lift a shell, and it feels heavier than it should. You feel it in your legs when standing in the turret starts making them shake. Your brain starts moving slower. Your reactions dull. In a place where seconds can mean the difference between life and death, that's a problem you can't afford. The veterans know how to deal with it, or at least how to endure it. Loosen the collar. Wipe your face with whatever rag you can find, even if it's filthy. Take small sips of water instead of gulping. Rest your arms on the cooler spots of the interior, if you can find any. Try not to think about the fact that your boots feel like they're filling with sweat. The goal isn't comfort, the goal is survival, and that means keeping your head clear enough to function when the fight starts. And the fight is coming. You can feel it in the way the commander scans the horizon more frequently, the way the gunner adjusts his grip on the traverse wheel, the way the driver leans forward in his seat, ready to push the Panzer into position. The heat isn't going anywhere, and neither are you. The only thing that will change when the first shells start flying is that now the sweat will be mixed with adrenaline. The sauna doesn't let up as the day goes on. It just settles in deeper, turning every part of the tank into part of the problem. By the time the sun dips low enough to ease the temperature, you're exhausted. Not from the battle. Not yet. But from just existing in this metal box through the hottest hours of the day. And tomorrow the sun will come up again, the steppe will heat up again, and the sauna will be waiting for you, whether you like it or not. When the sun finally drops behind the low, flat line of the steppe, you expect relief. All day, the Panzer has been a rolling furnace, heat pressing into your skin from every angle, sweat soaking through your uniform, until it felt like you were wearing a wet towel inside a sealed box. Surely night will bring some kind of mercy. It doesn't. Kursk at night doesn't cool you off. It flips the switch from slow roast to deep freeze, without any transition in between, and your tank becomes the perfect delivery system for that misery. Steel doesn't just hold heat, it holds cold too, and it doesn't take long for that stored heat to bleed away into the open air once the sun's gone. The same armour plates that scorched your hands at midday are now radiating chill, pulling the warmth out of the compartment and out of you with it. The temperature inside drops fast, and the damp patches on your shirt and trousers, the ones that were sweat just an hour ago, are now icy spots sucking heat from your skin. There's no insulation in here, nothing between you and the metal except your wool uniform, which was already uncomfortable in the heat, and now becomes a cold, itchy sponge. You pull your jacket tighter, but it's a joke. The chill seeps in through every seam, every button, and every spot where the fabric's worn thin from constant rubbing against the tank's interior. Your boots feel colder too, the leather stiffening slightly, the soles leaching heat from your feet until your toes start to go numb. You can try to warm your hands by tucking them under your arms or near your body, but as the loader, you're always one order away from having to grab a shell. And the shells are cold now. Every one you touch bites at your fingers, the smooth metal leaching away whatever warmth you've managed to store. The gun breech is cold too, as is every tool, lever, and surface you come into contact with. Touching anything for more than a few seconds feels like holding onto a block of ice. Your breath is visible now, little clouds hanging in the dim air of the crew compartment. The air feels drier at night, sharper in your throat. It's easier to breathe than in the heat, but each lungful leaves your chest feeling chilled from the inside. You can smell more now too. The cold makes every scent sharper. The diesel fumes are still there, but now they have a metallic edge. The human scent of sweat and uniforms hasn't gone anywhere. It's just gone stale, baked in by the day's heat and preserved in the cold like some unpleasant archaeological find. Movement becomes a calculation. If you stay still, you get colder. But every movement, bending to check a shell rack, twisting to adjust something, sends a chill rushing through your damp clothes. Your knees creak more in the cold. Your shoulders ache a little when you stretch. You find yourself shifting from one cramped position to another just to keep your muscles from stiffening entirely. The engine, when it's running, throws a bit of heat into the compartment, but it's inconsistent. The warmth is strongest near the bulkhead, and even then it's not much. It's not enough to make you comfortable, just enough to make you aware of how cold the rest of the space is. When the tank's stationary and the engine is off, the chill is total. You can feel it creeping into your fingers, your toes, the tip of your nose, and it's not as if you can throw on a blanket or change into something warmer. You've got what you're wearing, and that's it. The idea of extra clothing is a luxury that doesn't fit in a Panzer. You've seen Soviet crews wearing heavy quilted jackets in the cold, but you've also seen them on fire when the heat rolls back in, so you know it's not much of an improvement. The cold changes the way you think about your space. In the heat, the proximity of 4 other men was just another source of discomfort. All that extra body heat, all that sweat. At night, you're quietly grateful for it. The combined warmth of the crew is the only thing keeping the interior from feeling like the inside of a meat locker. You don't say it out loud, but you lean a little closer. Let your knees touch the gunner's. Let your shoulder press against the commander's leg. Not because you like it, but because it makes the cold just a little more bearable. The outside world is worse. If you have to pop the hatch for any reason, spotting, stretching, taking a piss, the night air hits you like a slap. The step wind carries nothing to block it, so it sweeps right into the open turret, cutting through your uniform in seconds. You close the hatch fast, but the damage is done. You're colder than before, and now the interior feels even more like a fridge by comparison. There's no real sleeping in these conditions, at least not well. You try to rest when you can, head leaning against a relatively clean patch of armour, arms crossed. The vibration of the idling engine might lull you for a few minutes, but then your foot cramps from the cold, or your shoulder seizes up, and you're awake again, teeth clenched, willing yourself to ignore it. If you do manage to drift off, it's the kind of shallow, twitchy sleep that leaves you just as tired as when you started. The night makes every sound outside louder. You hear the tracks of other tanks clanking in the dark, the occasional far-off crack of a rifle, the wind hissing through the grass. Inside, the cold makes the metal ping and contract, little sharp noises that remind you the tank is as alive to the temperature as you are. Every creak and groan of the steel feels like a reminder that you're inside something built for war, not for comfort. And when dawn comes, it's not gradual. The sun hits the step, the air shifts, and the icebox you've been sitting in starts climbing back toward the sauna you left yesterday. You're still wearing the same damp, cold uniform, but now it's heating up again, trapping yesterday's sweat and last night's chill together in a combination that makes your skin crawl. You go from shivering to sweating without ever feeling comfortable in between. It's another day in Kursk, and the cycle's just starting over. Noise is one of those things you think you can handle. You've been around loud engines. Maybe you've fired a rifle without ear protection. Maybe you've worked in a factory or stood too close to the speakers at a concert. You think you know what loud means. Inside a Panzer at Kursk, you learn you've been living a sheltered life. Here, loud isn't just sound. It's a physical force that pushes its way into your skull, rattles your teeth, and refuses to leave even when the day is over. The moment the Maybach engine turns over, the interior fills with a low, throaty growl. It's not unpleasant at first. You can almost pretend it's a comforting background hum, the heartbeat of the tank. But that's just idling. The instant the driver puts it in gear and the tracks start moving, the sound ramps up into a constant mechanical roar. It's not just coming from behind you. It's coming from under you, through the floor plates, through the steel walls, through the very air you're breathing. Every surface in the tank is a conductor for vibration. Your boots feel it first, the soles buzzing with each rotation of the drive sprocket. Your seat picks it up next, the vibrations running through the thin padding, if you have any at all, and into your spine. The gear shifts are their own punctuation, a grinding metallic clash as the transmission engages, followed by the deep, throaty strain of the engine as it pulls 45 tons of steel forward. Then there's the track noise. Each link slaps down onto the ground with a heavy, rhythmic clank. Over flat ground, it's repetitive but manageable. Over rough ground, it's chaotic, the pattern breaking into jolts and crashes as the suspension takes hits. The sound bounces off the inside of the hull, magnified by the steel shell you're all sitting in, until it's hard to tell whether you're hearing the left track, the right track, or both at once. And that's before you start firing. When the main gun goes off, there's no gentle build-up, no warning tone, no chance to brace beyond the half second between the commander's order and the gunner's trigger squeeze. The world inside the tank becomes a white hot blast of sound and force. The breech slams back, the recoil pushes through the floor into your legs, and the report of the gun is so loud it feels like it's inside your skull. Even if you've stuffed cotton in your ears, or are lucky enough to have some kind of basic protection, it doesn't matter. The shockwave still punches through, leaving your hearing fuzzy, like your ears are underwater. The machine guns are constant companions too. The coaxial MG34 or MG42 chatters with a sharp, metallic snarl that somehow cuts through the deeper engine noise. Every burst is a staccato hammering against the walls of the turret, a reminder that you're not just riding in a machine, you're inside a weapon. The vibration from sustained fire makes your fingertips tingle if you're anywhere near the mounts. Even when you're not firing, you're surrounded by the noise of other tanks. In a column, the sound is a rolling thunder, each vehicle adding its own layer to the collective roar. You hear the squeal of metal on metal as turrets turn, the distant whoosh and thud of other guns firing, the occasional deafening clang when something, a rock, a shell fragment, or a loose tool hits your own armour. Inside, you've also got the voices, and the intercom system is primitive, crackling with static and distortion. The commander's voice cuts in sharp and loud, half shouted to punch through the background. The driver barks acknowledgements that sound more like grunts. The gunner calls out ranges, corrections, and ammo types in clipped phrases. None of it is calm or measured. Everything is loud, urgent, and just this side of incomprehensible when the tank is in motion. You can't get away from it. There's no quiet corner to retreat to. No moment of real silence. Even when the tank is stopped with the engine off, your ears are still ringing. You hear phantom noises, the imagined rumble of the engine, the ghostly echo of the main gun, the steady clank of tracks that aren't moving. The inside of your head feels like it's been stuffed with cotton, and you catch yourself saying, "What?" more often than you should. Over time, you start noticing the little ways the noise wears you down. You miss half of what's said to you unless it's repeated. Unless you find yourself talking louder than necessary because your sense of volume is gone. When you climb out of the tank, The sudden openness of the air feels unnatural. The world seems too quiet, and your brain keeps waiting for the next mechanical roar to roll over you. Veterans will tell you that after long enough, you stop hearing it. That's not true. You just stop noticing how much it bothers you. Your body adapts in the only way it can, by filing the constant noise into the background of your existence. It's still there, doing its damage, but you learn to live in it like fish live in water. You don't think about it until you're out of it, and then you realise how deep it went. But at Kursk, there's no out of it until the day's fighting is over. The noise is part of the job, part of the space, part of the tank itself. And when the battle gets close, the volume goes from bad to worse. Every gun within range will be adding its voice to the chaos, and your Panzer will be right in the middle of the chorus, singing its own deafening part. The human body doesn't care about the timetable of war. You can be halfway through loading a shell, or bouncing across a field, or sitting in total silence waiting for an order, and nature will tap you on the shoulder and let you know that it's time. Out in the open, this is an inconvenience. Inside a Panzer at Kursk, it's a full-scale logistical nightmare. The first thing you learn about comfort breaks in a tank is that the word comfort doesn't belong there. There's nothing comfortable about it. You don't have a toilet. You don't have privacy. You don't even have much room to adjust your position, let alone take care of business. What you do have is a sealed steel box, 4 other men within arm's reach, and a limited selection of improvised options that range from bad to worse. If you're lucky, and lucky here is a very relative term, you've got an empty tin from breakfast, or a bottle that someone thought to bring along. This is your best case scenario. You use it, you cap it or close it, and you stash it somewhere until you can throw it out. Simple in theory, except for the part where you're crouched awkwardly between the ammo racks, trying to aim without spilling, while the tank jolts over uneven ground. The smell is immediate and inescapable. Everyone smells it. No one says anything, because they've either done it themselves or will before the day's over. If you're not so lucky, you wait. You hold it in through the bumps, through the noise, through the tension, until the commander calls a halt, and you can scramble out the hatch. This sounds better until you remember where you are. The flat, open steppe of Kursk, in the middle of one of the biggest battles in history. Every second you spend outside is another second you're a target. You don't wander off into the bushes. There are no bushes. You crouch behind the tank's hull, hoping no one on the other side has a rifle trained in your direction, and you finish as fast as humanly possible. The worst situation is when there's no halt coming, no spare container, and no way you're making it to the end of the shift without doing something about it. That's when you find a corner, a spot on the floor that's already filthy enough that no one will notice one more problem. You do what you have to do, you pretend it's not happening, and you pray the driver doesn't hit a deep rut at the wrong moment. Later, you'll wish you'd picked a different corner, but by then it's part of the floor's ecosystem. Solid waste is a whole different challenge. The veterans have a system. Go before you get in the tank. Go whenever you get out. And if all else fails, you deal with it in a way that's nobody's favourite topic of conversation. An empty ammo box works in a pinch, but it's a grim experience, and you'd better hope the tank isn't in motion when you try it. Once you're done, you seal it and wait for a chance to dump it somewhere far from where you'll be spending the night. You might wonder why there's no built-in solution. The answer is simple. No one designing the Panzer cared. The engineers were focused on armour angles, engine performance, gun placement. The comfort of the crew wasn't on the blueprint. The assumption was that you'd be out of the tank often enough to take care of your needs, or that you would make do when necessary. At Kursk, where the fighting is constant and the movement rarely stops, make do is the rule, not the exception. And here's the thing. Once it's done, it doesn't go away. There's no flushing mechanism, no ventilation to sweep it out. It's just part of the air now, mixing with the diesel fumes, the sweat, the cordite, and everything else you've been breathing all day. The smell settles into the fabric of your uniform, into the padding of your headset, into your memory. The longer you serve in the tank, the less you think about it in the moment. The first time, you're embarrassed, trying to make it as discreet as possible. After a few weeks, it's just another task, like loading a shell or checking the oil pressure. You still don't like it, but you stop wasting energy on the idea that it's avoidable. Water discipline plays into this too. You don't drink much during the day, not just because supplies are limited, but because every sip is another step towards needing a break you can't take. You ration your water intake the way you ration your ammo, carefully with an eye on the long haul. That means you spend most of the day thirsty, but at least you're not adding to the list of problems inside the tank. When you finally get a chance to climb out and find a proper spot, it feels like a small victory. You're still in the middle of a battlefield. You're still surrounded by noise and dust and danger, but at least you can stand up straight, stretch your legs, and breathe air that doesn't smell like the inside of a diesel-powered latrine. You savour it for the few seconds you get, because you know you'll be back inside soon, and the cycle will start over. Out here, in a battle like Kursk, comfort isn't measured in clean clothes or a soft bed. It's measured in the rare moments when you can answer nature's call without a turret over your head and 45 tons of steel wrapped around your body. Those moments are few, and they never last. The Panzer looks like an unstoppable force when you see it in photographs. All sharp lines, thick armour, and that long, confident barrel. The truth is, it's only unstoppable until something inside it stops working. Out here at Kursk, in the middle of the biggest armoured battle in history, the enemy isn't just Soviet shells, mines, or anti-tank rifles. It's also your own machine, a collection of moving parts that all have to work perfectly for the tank to be anything more than a 45-ton steel shed. And every hour you're in the field, every kilometre you crawl forward, there's a part of your brain quietly wondering what's going to give out first. Because the Panzer isn't magic. It's complicated. It's a machine built by human hands, in wartime under pressure, with components designed in the comfort of a German factory, but now being asked to survive Russian dust, mud, and heat. Every bolt, every cable, every bearing has its own little clock ticking down to the moment it fails. You don't get a warning light, or a pleasant chime, or even a clear symptom in most cases. You just find out when it happens. And usually, it happens at the worst possible time. The track is one of your constant worries. Without it, you're nothing. One loose pin, one cracked link, and the whole thing can peel off like a broken zipper. Out here, with the ground as uneven as a bad cobblestone road, the tracks are taking abuse every second. Every jolt, every bump, every time you grind over a ditch or a tree stump, you're daring them to hold together. You can feel the difference in the ride when something's not right. a strange vibration, a louder than usual clank. And when you feel it, your stomach drops because you know what's coming. If you throw a track in combat, that's it. You're dead in the water. Getting it back on isn't a matter of minutes. It's hours of filthy, back-breaking work with crowbars and brute force. And that's if you're not under fire. Under fire you don't even try, unless you've got cover, because otherwise you're just giving the enemy a stationary target. More than one crew has had to abandon their tank and run, because a track failed at the wrong time. The engine is another constant threat. The Maybach is powerful, but it's also finicky. It runs hot even in good conditions, and Kursk in July is not good conditions. The cooling system can only do so much when the air outside feels like it's straight out of an oven. If it overheats, you're not going anywhere until it cools down, and sitting still on a battlefield is not a winning strategy. Oil leaks, fan belt failures, clogged filters. Any of these can bring your day to a grinding halt, literally. The gearbox is a beast in its own right. Shifting it is less like driving and more like wrestling, and if you get it wrong too many times or too hard, you can break it. When that happens, you're stuck in one gear or no gear at all, and your options narrow to fix it here or walk away from it. Neither is good. Even the gun, your one big reason for being here, can fail you. The recoil system can jam, the breech can stick, or a shell can misfire. Clearing a misfire inside the cramped turret isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. You're handling a live round that just decided not to go off, inside a space where you can barely move, with 4 other men breathing down your neck. If the breech is stuck, you've got to get it open with brute force, and if you're in the middle of a firefight, that's time you don't have. Then there are the little things that don't stop you outright, but make everything worse. A turret traverse that sticks so you can't swing the gun quickly. A vision block that cracks or clouds over. A radio that decides today is the day it's only going to hiss static instead of orders. Each small failure chips away at your effectiveness, and each one takes your mind off the fight because you're thinking about how to work around it. The worst part is that any of these problems can pile up. A track froze, you try to fix it, and while you're outside with your sleeves rolled up in the dust, the engine starts overheating. Or the gearbox starts grinding just as the commander calls for a quick change in position. There's no safe place to pull over and take your time. You fix what you can as fast as you can, or you leave the tank behind and hope you can make it back on foot. You carry tools, of course. Crowbars, wrenches, hammers. But these are meant for field expedients, not full repairs. You can tighten a loose fitting, knock a bent plate back into place, replace a pin in the track if you've got one handy. You can't swap out an engine or rebuild a gearbox in the middle of a battle. That's depot work, and the depot might as well be on the moon when you're in the thick of it. Every time you hear a new noise, every time you feel a new vibration through the floor, you wonder if this is the moment your luck runs out mechanically. And the cruel joke is that you can do everything right, maintain the tank as best you can, check it before every movement, baby it over rough terrain, and it can still let you down. Because the Panzer isn't alive, and it doesn't care about your plans. It's just a machine, and machines break. At Kursk, where you're pushing the limits of what the tank can handle every single day, the question isn't if it will break down, it's when, and the when will almost certainly be when you need it most. From the outside, you'd think a tank commander has the battlefield laid out in front of him like a map. You picture sweeping views of the steppe, the enemy spotted miles away, precise manoeuvres executed with calm confidence. Then you get inside a Panzer and realise that seeing is a luxury you don't have. Visibility isn't just limited. It's so bad that half the time you're fighting with about as much visual information as someone trying to drive a bus by looking through the mail slot in the door. The armour that's keeping bullets out is the same armour that's cutting you off from the world. There's no windshield. There's no panoramic view. You've got vision slits, narrow horizontal slots cut into the armour, and periscopes that give you a magnified look at a tiny slice of the outside world. Through these you see not much. A few degrees to the left and right, a strip of ground, maybe the edge of the sky if you crane your neck. Everything else is blind spots. If you're the driver, your world is a letterbox. You see a strip of the ground ahead, enough to avoid the biggest craters and aim generally in the right direction. Anything to the sides? You'll have to guess. You're steering 45 tons of steel across uneven ground, relying on the commander's shouted directions to avoid obstacles you can't see until they're under the nose of the tank. The gunner has a sight that's great for aiming at a specific target, once it's found, but it's useless for scanning. You don't look around through a gun sight. You zero in on a fixed point, and if the target moves, you move the whole turret to follow it. That takes time, and it means that anything outside your narrow field is invisible unless the commander or loader spots it and tells you. The commander has the best view, relatively speaking, from the cupola. Multiple periscopes, maybe even the option to pop his head up for a quick look, if he's willing to risk catching a bullet or a shell fragment for the privilege. But even from up there, the view is fractured into overlapping narrow cones, each one showing a piece of the picture but never the whole thing. He has to constantly rotate, scanning in slices, stitching together an idea of what's happening out there while also giving orders, watching for threats, and staying alive. For the loader, your spot, visibility is basically zero. You're tucked down by the ammo racks, with your back to most of the outside world. If you want to see anything, you have to stop what you're doing, lean awkwardly toward a periscope or the open breach, and risk getting in someone else's way. Most of the time, you're relying entirely on what the commander tells you, or on the rising pitch of his voice when something unexpected happens. And here's the part no one tells you before you climb in. The slits and periscopes get filthy in minutes. Dust from the steppe, mud splashed up by the tracks, insect guts, smoke residue from your own gun. It all collects on the glass until you're peering through a brownish blur. Cleaning them means someone has to open a hatch or, worse, climb out. That's not happening under fire, so you make do, squinting through the haze and hoping the dark shape in the distance is an enemy tank and not one of your own. In combat, the problem gets worse. Smoke from burning grass or vehicles rolls across the battlefield, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Shell impacts throw up dust clouds that hang in the air. If the sun's low, glare bounces straight into your periscope, washing everything out. You can hear gunfire, feel impacts against the armour, smell the smoke, but you can't see the source. That's when you realise you're not so much aiming and manoeuvring as you are reacting. The commander shouts, "Target, left!" and you swing the turret, trusting his eyes because you can't see it yourself yet. The driver gets hard right, and throws the tank into a turn without knowing exactly what he's avoiding. Everyone inside is operating on partial information, straining to piece together a mental map from scattered glimpses and shouted bearings. The stress this causes is constant. You're not just fighting the enemy, you're fighting your own blindness. Every time you load a shell, you wonder if the real threat is sitting just outside your field of vision. Every time you move, you wonder if you're driving straight into a kill zone you can't see. And when you finally do spot something, there's a decent chance it's already too late. By the time it's in your view, it might already be firing at you. This is why tank crews rely so heavily on coordination. You have to trust that the commander is calling the right targets, that the driver's steering where he's told, that the gunner's hitting what he's aiming at. You can't double check. You can't confirm for yourself. You work off faith and fragments. When it works, it feels almost supernatural. The whole crew moving like a single organism, hitting a target you never saw coming. When it doesn't, you feel helpless, blind, and painfully aware that someone out there has a much clearer view of you than you do of them. And Kursk is the worst place for this kind of blindness. The battlefield is crawling with enemy tanks, hidden anti-tank guns, infantry with explosives, and enough dust and smoke to turn the whole landscape into a fog. You could be 50 metres from a Soviet gun position and have no idea until it fires. And by then, you're either reacting instantly or you're done. Inside a Panzer, fighting blind isn't an exaggeration. It's the default state. The real miracle isn't that crews hit their targets. It's that they hit anything at all. The steppe at Kursk looks dry and solid from a distance. The kind of ground you imagine tanks rolling over without breaking stride. That's the lie it tells you. The reality is that Kursk mud is always lurking, waiting for the right mix of water, weight, and bad luck to turn your Panzer into a stationary bunker. And out here, getting stuck isn't just inconvenient. It's practically signing your own death certificate. The problem starts with the soil itself. The top layer is dusty and fine, kicked up into choking clouds by every passing vehicle. But underneath, it holds moisture like a sponge. When it rains, or even when there's heavy morning dew, the ground turns into a slick, clinging mess that laughs at traction. Add the weight of 45 tons of Panzer, and you're not so much driving across the battlefield as slowly sinking into it. You feel it the instant it starts to go wrong. The ride changes. The tank's movement loses its crisp, forward push and takes on a sluggish, wallowing quality, like you're trying to row through porridge. The tracks spin more than they grip, throwing up wet clumps that slap against the hull. The driver's hands tighten on the levers. The engine note rises as he pours on more power, and you can hear the strain in the Maybach's growl. Inside, everyone tenses, because you all know what's coming next. If the driver can't find firmer ground fast, the tracks start digging in. The rear end sinks first, throwing the nose upward just enough to make aiming the gun awkward. Mud packs into the drive sprockets and rollers, building up in thick layers that add resistance to every rotation. Before long, you're not moving forward at all. You're just burying yourself deeper. And every second you're stuck is another second the enemy has to find you. Getting out is hell. It means reversing, trying to rock the tank back and forth, or having the rest of the crew pile out with shovels and crowbars to dig around the tracks. Sometimes you lay down anything you can find, planks, logs, even spare track links, to give the treads something to bite into. But doing this in peacetime conditions is one thing. Doing it while you're in range of Soviet artillery is another. Every clang of metal and grunt of effort feels like it's being broadcast across the steppe, and you work knowing that if a spotter has eyes on you, you might not live to finish the job. The mud doesn't just slow you down physically, it eats into the tank's guts. Wet earth gets into every crevice, grinding against moving parts until they wear faster than they should. It fouls the track pins, cakes the suspension, and clogs the air intakes if you're unlucky. Cleaning it out is a nightmare, especially in the field, and most of the time you just accept that it's there, waiting to cause trouble later. Even when you're moving, the mud is a constant hazard. It splashes up onto the vision blocks, blinding the driver till someone wipes them down. It coats the tools strapped to the hull, making them slippery when you need them most. It adds weight, hundreds of extra kilos in clinging wet soil stuck to every part of the undercarriage, which slows you down and makes the engine work harder. And then there's the psychological side. Every time you cross a patch of darker ground, every time you see grass bending under unseen water, you wonder if this is where it's going to happen again. You remember the last time, the panic in the crew's voices, the sound of incoming fire while you were half buried. You know the Soviets know the terrain better than you do, that they've chosen their ground carefully, and that they'd be happy to see you bogged down where you can't manoeuvre or retreat. Mud doesn't care about your orders, your timetable, or the weight of the battle ahead. It doesn't care about the engineering behind your tank, your training, or your confidence. It just waits, silent and patient, for the moment when the steppe turns soft. And when it does, it doesn't need to kill you itself. It just holds you still long enough for something else to finish the job. If the Panzer were a living creature, it wouldn't be a loyal warhorse or a fearless guard dog. It'd be more like a surly mule, strong, impressive, and capable of great things when it feels like it, but always carrying the risk of deciding, for no obvious reason, that today is the day it's going to ruin your life. The longer you spend inside one at Kursk, the more you realise that the real battle isn't just against the Red Army, it's against the mechanical gremlins that live in every bolt, every bearing, and every cable of your own tank. You don't see them, of course, but you feel their presence in the way things don't quite work the same 2 days in a row. Yesterday, the turret traverse was smooth and responsive. Today, it sticks halfway through a turn, forcing the gunner to grunt and muscle it the rest of the way. The driver's clutch might have felt fine in the morning, but by afternoon it's grabbing late and jerking the whole tank every time you change gears. The intercom crackles 1 minute and goes silent the next, leaving you shouting over the engine noise like you're in a pub fight instead of an armoured vehicle. The gremlins don't need big failures to make your life miserable. They thrive on small, irritating problems that stack up until they're just as dangerous as a single catastrophic breakdown. A periscope lens fogs over, and now you've lost a chunk of your vision until you can wipe it clean. If you can reach it without taking your helmet off and smacking your head on the hatch rim. A track pin starts to loosen, and you hear an irregular clank with every revolution. A little time bomb that might give out in the middle of a firefight. The engine fan starts whining in a way it didn't yesterday, and you know you'll be listening for that sound for the rest of the day, wondering if it's going to turn into smoke and silence. Sometimes the gremlins work together. A sticky turret traverse means the gunner's slower to line up shots. A sluggish gearbox means the driver's slower to put you in a good firing position. A weak radio connection means the commander's slower to get you the order to move or fire. None of these things on their own will kill you, but in a battle like Kursk, where seconds matter, that little bit of lost time can be all it takes for someone else's shell to find you first. You try to fight back with maintenance. Every spare moment, you're checking bolts, wiping parts clean, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. The tools are basic, the light's bad, and there's never enough time to do it properly. But you do what you can. Sometimes you win. The squeak in the idler wheel goes away. The loose hatch hinge is tightened. The fuel line stops leaking. Other times, you spend an hour swearing at a stubborn part, only for it to behave for a few minutes, and then go right back to misbehaving. The environment makes everything worse. Dust from the step seeps into every moving part, grinding against metal until tolerances widen and performance drops. The heat expands parts until they don't fit quite right. The cold contracts them until they bind. The mud cakes onto components, adding weight and throwing things off balance. Water finds its way into gearboxes and electrical systems, and once it's in there, it doesn't want to leave. And sometimes, the gremlins aren't even caused by wear or the elements. They're baked in at the factory. Wartime production means parts that should have been tested for weeks are rushed into service after a day or two. Fit and finish aren't what they were in peacetime. And while the Panzer is still a marvel of engineering on paper, in the field it's as much about dealing with its quirks as it is about using its strengths. The cruelest trick the gremlins play is letting you think a problem is solved. The gearbox grinds all morning, then runs smooth for an hour, lulling you into a false sense of security before locking up just when you need to change gears in a hurry. The gun breech that stuck yesterday runs fine today, right up until you've got the perfect shot lined up, and it refuses to close all the way. You start to feel paranoid, second-guessing every noise, every change in feel, because you know the gremlins are never really gone. They're just waiting. At Kursk, there's no pulling over to spend a few days in a nice, well-equipped maintenance depot. You fix what you can, you improvise for what you can't, and you live with the rest. The gremlins might not kill you directly, but they're always there, working quietly to make sure that when the enemy does take their shot, you're just a little slower, a little less precise, and a lot more vulnerable. You don't have to see an anti-tank weapon to know it's there. Most of the time, by the time you've spotted it, it's already done its job. The first sign is usually a sound, a hard metallic clang against the armour, or the sharper, faster crack of a hit that didn't just glance off. Out here at Kursk, the battlefield is crawling with weapons designed to ruin your day, and every Soviet with a trigger finger seems to have one. They're the uninvited guests to every engagement, and they never arrive empty-handed. The smallest of these are the infantry portable weapons. Soviet anti-tank rifles, long, awkward-looking beasts, can punch through thinner armour at close range. Against a Panzer's frontal plate, they're not likely to do much more than chip paint, but your sides, rear, and vision ports are another story. A single well-placed shot through a vision slit can kill or blind a crewman, and if it smashes the optics, you're suddenly trying to fight half-blind. You can hear these hits when they happen. A sharp, whip-like crack, followed by the sound of metal complaining. Then there are the anti-tank guns. These are the real bread and butter of Soviet defences. towed field pieces ranging from the small but quick 45mm up to the hulking F-46mm S-3 and beyond. The crews that man them are fast, practiced and patient. They know how to let you come just close enough before they open up, maximising their chance of a kill. The hit from one of these is unmistakable. The whole tank shudders, your teeth rattle, and there's an instant of dead silence in your head where your brain tries to process whether you're still alive. Worse still are the high-velocity guns mounted on Soviet tanks and self-propelled guns. The T-34's 76mm gun is nothing to scoff at, and the newer models are even nastier. A direct hit from one of those can shear off track links, stove in side plates, or punch straight through weaker armour sections. If the shell gets inside, the real horror begins. Fragments, spall, and superheated gases bouncing around the crew compartment like a swarm of invisible lethal bees. And then there are the shaped charges, the close-range killers. Soviet infantry with anti-tank grenades or magnetic mines will wait in trenches, behind wrecks, or in tall grass until you rumble by. They don't have to kill you outright. One blast in the right place can blow a track, wreck your suspension, or disable your gun. Once you're immobilised, you're a sitting duck for follow-up shots from heavier weapons. The thought of someone creeping up on your blind side with one of these while you're focused on targets ahead is enough to keep you glancing nervously at every shadow. Artillery plays its part too. Heavy shells meant for soft targets can still kill a tank crew if the blast is close enough. Even if the armour holds, the concussion can knock you senseless, and shrapnel can wreck external fittings. Antennas, tools, spare track links, in seconds. The random, indirect nature of artillery fire means you can't plan for it. One moment you're fine, the next a shell's landed close enough to make your ears ring and your hands shake. Every anti-tank weapon has one thing in common. You almost never see it coming. The step is wide open, but that works both ways. The Soviets are experts at concealment. An anti-tank gun might be dug in behind a low rise, camouflaged so well it's just another lump of earth until the muzzle flashes. Infantry with grenades melt into the grass until they're close enough to make their move. Even enemy tanks can use the folds in the terrain to get the first shot in before you've had time to traverse your turret. Inside the Panzer, you react to hits by feel as much as sound. A glancing blow makes a sharp, skipping noise and leaves you shaken but mobile. A solid hit slams into the hull like a giant's hammer, the noise deafening in the confined space. If it penetrates, there's a flash, a burst of heat and chaos. Someone screaming, smoke filling the compartment, the commander barking orders to bail out or return fire. The knowledge that any moment could bring that kind of impact hangs over every second of every advance. You can't hunker down. Your job is to move, to fight, to keep pushing. But every time you see a puff of smoke on the horizon, every time the commander swings the cupola around faster than usual, you wonder if the next round has your name on it. At Kursk, the battlefield isn't just about finding and hitting targets. It's about staying alive long enough to do it. And the Soviet arsenal is more than happy to remind you that no matter how tough your Panzer looks from the outside, there's always something out there that can crack it open like a tin can. An artillery barrage isn't like a tank duel. In a duel, you at least get to see the enemy, line up your shot, and try to hit before you're hit. With artillery, there's no back and forth. It's just them, far away, hidden behind the horizon, lobbing steel at you like some angry god, dropping hammers from the sky. At Kursk, where both sides have enough guns to turn acres of farmlands into smoking craters in minutes, artillery barrages are as regular as sunrise, except less predictable and far less welcome. It usually starts with a sound that's hard to mistake once you've heard it. It's not the sharp crack of a rifle or the whoomp of a tank gun. It's a distant, heavy thump, often several at once, followed by a moment of eerie silence as the shells cover the distance. Then a whistling, low at first, rising fast, that ends in a violent concussive crash. Sometimes the first one lands close. Sometimes it's hundreds of meters away. But the thing about artillery is that the first impact isn't the one you worry about. It's the dozens, maybe hundreds, coming right after it. From inside a Panzer, artillery is an especially miserable experience. You're not in a trench where you can at least flatten yourself against the dirt. You're sitting on tons of metal that rings like a gong when shrapnel hits it, amplifying every impact into a physical vibration you feel in your bones. The armour will usually keep out the fragments, but it won't stop the shockwave. Every near miss feels like someone smacking the tank with a giant sledgehammer. The floor jumps under your boots, the walls shudder, and anything not bolted down rattles like it's trying to escape. You can't hear much beyond the barrage once it starts. The engine noise, the intercom chatter, even your own breathing gets swallowed by the repeated concussions. The commander's voice comes through as bursts of static and half-shouted words, and you nod along even if you're not sure what was said, because asking for a repeat is pointless in this noise. Your world narrows to the impacts. How close, how frequent, and whether they're getting nearer. The smell changes too, the outside air, when it makes its way in through the hatches and vision slits, carries the acrid tang of high explosives and the sharp scent of scorched earth. It mixes with the diesel fumes and sweat until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. The air gets hotter with each nearby strike, like the battlefield itself is heating up from all the fire being poured into it. If you're moving during a barrage, the driver's life gets much harder. The ground churned by repeated shelling is rough, uneven, and unpredictable. Craters appear where there wasn't one a moment before. If a shell lands close enough, it can throw dirt and debris across the tank, blinding the vision blocks and forcing someone to wipe them clean. Not an easy task when you're lurching over rubble. And the fear isn't just about being hit directly. A lucky strike in the right place can immobilise you without ever piercing the armour. A shell bursting near the tracks can throw one off, bury the tank in loose soil, or break suspension components. Once you're stuck, the next few salvos are basically an execution. There's a strange rhythm to surviving a barrage. At first, every whistle and crash sends your pulse through the roof. But after a few dozen impacts, you start moving on instinct, bracing at each incoming whistle, keeping your head down, checking the crew, making sure you're still operational. It doesn't make the danger any less real, but it stops you from freezing up entirely. When the barrage finally lifts, it's rarely because you've been spared. It's because the guns have shifted to a new target, or the enemy is following it up with an attack. You roll forward, ears still ringing, eyes scanning for whatever's left of the battlefield ahead. The ground is scarred, littered with splintered wood, shredded metal, and the remains of whatever unlucky vehicles or men were caught in the open. And somewhere behind you, you know the artillery crews are already preparing the next salvo. In Kursk, You don't wonder if you'll be under artillery fire. You wonder when and how close the next one will be. The Panzer is a weapon first, a vehicle second, and a living space a very distant third. But even as a weapon, it's only as dangerous as the ammunition you've got inside it. At Kursk, where the fighting is constant and the targets are everywhere, the ammo problem isn't just about running out. It's about what you carry, where you put it, and what happens if any of it gets hit. From the loader's perspective, your perspective, the entire job revolves around ammunition. You know exactly how many rounds are in the racks before you roll out, and you know exactly how fast that number drops once the battle starts. Each type of shell has its own place. Armour piercing for enemy tanks, high explosive for guns and infantry, smoke if you need to cover a retreat or blind a target. You've drilled enough to grab the right type without looking, twisting in the cramped space to haul it out, ram it into the breach, and get ready for the next order. The problem is you can't carry everything you want. Space inside a Panzer is measured in centimetres, and ammunition is heavy. The racks are packed as tightly as they can be, shells stacked in every available corner, some in awkward spots that require you to practically fold yourself in half to reach them. When the easy access rounds are gone, you're crawling over and around your crewmates to dig out the rest, all while the tank is moving and the battlefield is trying to kill you. Each shell is its own hazard. You don't think about it much during training, but once you're in combat, the reality hits you. You're sitting inside a metal box surrounded by explosives. If a shell penetrates the armour and hits your ammo rack, the result isn't damage, it's obliteration. One spark, one fragment in the wrong place, and the tank goes from fighting machine to fireball in seconds. You've seen it happen to others. You've smelled it afterward. You know what it means when a plume of black smoke starts pouring out of a turret. This is why the placement of ammunition matters so much. The safest rounds are deep inside the tank, away from direct line of sight hits. The most dangerous are the ones stored in the sponsons or along the hull sides, where a lucky enemy shot can set them off. But the safest rounds are also the hardest to get to, and in a fight, speed matters more than comfort. You're always balancing between quick access and survivability. Resupply is another part of the problem. Out here, there's no neat, orderly depot just down the road. To get more ammo, you need a lull in the fighting long enough for a supply truck or half-track to reach you, or for you to back out of the line and fetch it yourself. Every trip to resupply is time you're not firing, and every shell you don't have when you need it is a missed opportunity that might cost lives. More than one crew has been forced to withdraw from a perfect firing position simply because they burned through their loadout too fast. You learn to ration fire without losing effectiveness. Every round counts. You don't waste armour-piercing shells on soft targets. You don't fire high explosive at a tank unless there's no other choice. And you keep an exact mental count of what's left, so you're not surprised at the worst possible moment. The commander might be watching the battle, but the loader is watching the racks. The stress of the ammo problem doesn't stop when you're not firing. You still have to move it around inside the tank. Sometimes the recoil from the gun shakes the stowed rounds loose, and you have to wedge them back into place before they roll into someone's leg or rattle against the hull. If you're taking fire, every clang of a loose shell sounds like the prelude to an explosion, and you get it secured as fast as you can. And there's the weight. Fully loaded, the tank is heavier, slower, and harder on the engine. You can feel the difference when you're stocked to the limit, and you can feel it again when you're down to the last few rounds. The first makes you sluggish, the second makes you nervous. At Kursk, ammunition is both your lifeline and your liability. You need it to fight, but you live with the knowledge that you're hauling around enough explosive to end you instantly if the enemy gets lucky. Every time you slam a round into the breach, you're reminded that it's not just a weapon you're loading. It's also a risk you're taking, one you'll keep taking until the fight is over or the racks are empty. Getting hit inside a Panzer isn't like in the movies. There's no neat little spark and a quick "we're hit" before you roll to a stop. Out here at Kursk, a hit is a full body experience. You don't just see or hear it, you feel it in your bones, in your teeth, in the pit of your stomach. And whether it kills you outright, knocks you out of the fight, or somehow leaves you still rolling, it's never something you forget. The first sign can be sound. A glancing blow makes a shrill, ugly screech as the shell skips across the armour, a noise that rattles in your skull and leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. A solid hit lands like a blacksmith's hammer on a church bell, a deep, resonant clang that shakes the entire tank. The noise is deafening, even through to the constant roar of the engine, and for a split second afterward, everything inside feels still, like the whole machine is holding its breath. Then comes the physical shock. Even if the armour holds, the force of the impact transfers through the hull and into you. Your helmet slams into the back of the seat or the side of the turret ring. Your knees and elbows take the hit from whatever solid surface is nearest. Loose gear jumps, tools fall from their hooks, and sometimes you do too, especially if the tank lurches violently as the driver reacts. If the hit penetrates, everything changes in an instant. There's no slow, cinematic hole being drilled through the steel. A penetrating shell bursts inside with a violent, explosive force. The armour itself turns into shrapnel, sending razor-edged fragments flying around the compartment at insane speed. You hear it before you register what's happening. A brutal tearing sound followed by chaos. Men shout or scream, smoke floods in, and the compartment fills with a choking stench of burning paint, oil, and flesh. Fire is your worst enemy in that moment. Ammunition stored anywhere near the point of impact can cook off, turning a bad hit into a catastrophic one. Even if the shells don't go, the heat from burning insulation, seat padding, and spilled fuel can make the air unbreathable in seconds. The loader and the gunner are usually closest to the breach point, and if they're hit, the rest of the crew has to choose between trying to help them and following the commander's order to bail out before the tank becomes a furnace. Not all penetrations kill instantly, but even a minor one can cripple you. A round that smashes through the vision port might blind the driver or leave him bleeding and half-conscious. A hit to the turret ring can jam it, locking your gun in place so you can't return fire effectively. Damage to the tracks or suspension might not kill the crew, but can immobilise the tank, which, in this kind of battle, often leads to the same end. And then there's the psychological hit. You might survive the impact without a scratch, but your hands will be shaking, your ears will be ringing. You'll keep glancing at the spot where the shell hit, expecting to see smoke or flames. Every creak of the armour, every puff of dust from the impact point, makes you wonder if you're about to get the follow-up shot that finishes the job. Bailing out is the last resort, and it's as dangerous as staying in. Once you open that hatch, you're in the open, and everyone on the other side knows it. Crews who survive the initial hit sometimes don't survive the sprint to cover. But if the tank is on fire, if the ammunition is cooking off, or if the commander shouts the order, you don't think twice. You just go. Because a burning tank is one of the worst places a human being can be. When you've been hit once, you never really relax again. Even if you make it back to safety, even if the damage is repaired and the tank is declared fit for combat, you'll hear that sound in your head the next time a shell whistles past. You'll brace for the impact that might not come, and if it does, you already know exactly how it's going to feel. In theory, a tank's armour is there to keep you alive. In practice, at Kursk, it's just buying you time. And if the moment comes when you have to get out, you'll discover that leaving a Panzer in the middle of a battle isn't a simple matter of opening a door and strolling away. Getting out alive is something you can't take for granted, not when every second counts, and every inch between you and cover is under someone else's aim. First, there's the problem of the exits themselves. You've got hatches, one for the driver and radio operator up front, one for the commander on top, and sometimes another for the loader or gunner, depending on the model. None of them are generous. They're just big enough for a man to squeeze through, which is fine if you're calm, unhurt, and not wearing anything bulky. But that's not how it happens. You're wearing gear, you might be bleeding, smoke might be pouring in, and the tank might not be sitting level, so you're crawling uphill to reach the hatch while it feels like the whole compartment is trying to push you back down. Then there's the order in which you get out. In an ideal world, everyone exits at once. In reality, you've got a narrow space, people in each other's way, and no time to politely wait your turn. The commander might go first to scout a safe direction, or the driver might have to crawl past the radio operator. Sometimes the wounded get shoved toward the hatch first. Sometimes they can't move without help, and helping them means you're both slower and more exposed. The moment you pop your head out, you're a target. Enemy infantry are always watching for tank crews bailing out, because a man outside the tank is easier to kill than a man inside it. Machine guns, snipers, even artillery spotters, they all know to look for that sudden movement on a tank's hull. If you're unlucky, they've been waiting for it. The safest exit is usually on the side facing away from the enemy, but in a chaotic fight, safe might not exist. And getting out is only step one. Once you're on the ground, you have to move. Quickly. The Panzer is big, noisy, and distinctive. It draws fire like a lightning rod. If the enemy was willing to hammer you while you were buttoned up, they'll be even happier to shoot at you in the open. The cover is often farther than you'd like, and crossing open ground while wearing boots, carrying gear, and possibly dragging an injured crewmate is a nightmare you can't really prepare for until it's happening. The worst is bailing out of a burning tank. The heat is immediate and overwhelming, and every breath tastes like scorched metal and chemical smoke. Flames crawl across the inside in seconds, and if they reach the ammunition, the whole thing can blow. There's no time to think. You're just moving, shoving, climbing, jumping. You might land badly. You might twist an ankle or worse. You might find yourself rolling in the dirt while tracer rounds stitch the ground around you. But you'll take that over being inside when the ammo cooks off. Sometimes you don't even get the luxury of choosing. A penetrating hit might blow the hatch open, knock you halfway out, or leave you scrambling in confusion while the commander shouts at you to move. You might not even realise you're wounded until you hit the ground and feel the pain. Adrenaline will carry you for a while, but not forever. And you know that every step is putting distance between you and the only real armour you had. And there's another truth no one likes to say out loud. Sometimes you can't get out. Maybe the hatch is jammed from the hit. Maybe debris or a twisted frame has blocked the way. Maybe you've been knocked out cold before you even had the chance to try. The crews you see running across the steppe after a tank kill aren't the whole story. Plenty never make it that far. When you climb into a Panzer at Kursk, you hope you'll climb out again under your own power. But hope is all it is. You train for it, you rehearse it in your head, you know where every handle and latch is without looking. Still, when the moment comes, it's chaos, and survival isn't guaranteed. Out here, the tank is your protection, right up until it becomes your prison. Surviving Kursk inside a Panzer doesn't mean you're done with it. The battle might be over, the tank parked or scrapped, and your uniform hung up. But the Panzer doesn't let go of you just because you've stepped outside. It stays with you, in your body, in your head, in ways you didn't expect and can't quite shake. The first thing you notice is the noise that isn't there anymore. For days, maybe weeks, your ears have been living in a world of constant engine roar, turret clanks, shouted orders, and the bone-shaking percussion of gunfire. When it stops, the silence isn't peaceful. It's strange, unsettling. You still catch yourself turning your head to locate noises that aren't real. The echo of treads over dirt, the high-pitched whine of the gearbox, the sharp crack of a nearby hit. It's not that you miss them. It's that your brain hasn't caught up to the idea that they're gone. Then there's your body. A few days in a Panzer is enough to leave you stiff, sore, and smelling like old sweat and engine oil. Weeks or months in one leaves deeper marks. Your back aches from hunching in cramped positions. Your knees crack from bracing against sudden jolts. Your hands are nicked and calloused from handling ammunition and greasy tools. You might have burns, small ones from hot metal, or larger scars from flash fires. Bruises fade, but the tension in your muscles takes longer to go. And the ringing in your ears, that might never leave. Your senses have been rewired too. You react to certain smells before you even register them. Diesel exhaust, burnt oil, scorched paint. They drag you back into the turret without warning. The smell of fireworks doesn't remind you of celebrations anymore. It smells like cordite, and you're already scanning for threats before you remember where you are. Sleep is a whole other battle. Out there, you learn to nap in short bursts, ready to wake instantly at a commander's shout or the thud of incoming fire. Back in relative safety, your body doesn't just switch back to peaceful rest. Every creak in the building, every truck passing outside, has you half awake, hand twitching toward a helmet that isn't there. The dreams, when they come, are vivid. Sometimes you're back in the loader's seat. Sometimes you're trying to get out of a hatch that won't open. Sometimes it's just the sound of shells hitting over and over. Even away from the front, you notice how your habits have changed. You avoid sitting with your back to a door. You glance at the corners of rooms as if scanning through periscopes. You keep track of the nearest exit without consciously thinking about it. Crowds make you uneasy, not because they're dangerous, but because they feel too close. Too much like the crush of bodies inside the turret. Some things stick because they were survival, and survival is hard to turn off. You still count objects without meaning to. Ammo, tools, supplies. Because you always needed to know what was left. You still flinch at sudden loud noises. And you still measure open ground by how much cover it offers. Because once, that was the difference between life and death. The Panzer also leaves its mark in ways you can't see. For some, it's a constant undercurrent of tension, like the fight never really ended. For others, it's a heavy numbness. The weight of things seen and done settling into place. You remember the faces of crewmen who didn't make it out. You remember the sound of the hit that killed them. You remember the tanks you left behind, burning in the distance, and you know that could have been you. You can walk away from a Panzer, but you can't walk away from the fact that you were inside one at Kursk. The smell, the noise, the heat, the fear, they fade, but they never vanish. You survived, yes. But survival here comes with its own price. One you'll be paying in pieces for the rest of your life. And deep down, you know the truth. If they told you tomorrow to climb back in, part of you would. Not because you want to, but because once you've lived inside a tank, the world outside feels too big, too open, and too unarmoured to ever be completely safe again. So that's the reality of being inside a Panzer at Kursk. The heat, the cold, the noise, the stink, the fear, the constant grind of machine, and man against an enemy who's just as determined to kill you as you are them. From the outside, it's easy to picture tanks as invincible beasts of war, churning across the steppe with unstoppable force. From the inside, you learn fast that they're as fragile as the men who crew them, and that every metre forward is paid for in sweat, strain, and sometimes blood. You felt the cramped steel pressing in on you, heard the hammering of shells against armour, breathed the poisoned air, and understood that the enemy doesn't need to destroy your tank to destroy you. They just have to outlast you. And now, stepping out of that hatch for the last time, you can see the truth plain as day. The Panzer isn't a shield that makes you untouchable. It's a gamble. Every time you climb in, you're betting your life on the hope that you'll climb out again. At Kursk, plenty didn't. And if you're honest with yourself, you wouldn't wish that ride on anyone, not even your worst enemy. Because once you've lived it, you understand what the history books won't tell you. Inside that armour, you're not untouchable. You're just next.